So glad you're with me this week. I'm getting ready to go on my study break. Actually, I have a week of vacation. I'll be back for a couple weeks, although I won't be speaking at church. I'll be back for a couple weeks in the office, and then I go to, I'm going to go out of country for a little while, and then I start my study break. And I'm super stoked about August 16th. That's a Saturday. We start Saturday nights back, Saturday Night Live at Yosemite Church. And I start a series mid-August through the Sermon on the Mount, and I'm super excited about that. Just meditating a lot on the Sermon on the Mount, trying to get the whole thing memorized, which is quite an endeavor, but I always wanted to do it, and so now's the time. So please plan on joining us. Encourage others to come on Saturday nights, spread the word. And as we go through this series, it's going to be wonderful because emotionally healthy discipleship is the invitation that Jesus has always offered believers. And this week, we're looking at the steps and the stages of spiritual formation or spiritual development. Certainly emotionally healthy spiritual development. So when we think about the steps, I'm saying that we need to be a lot like AAA. So I said three things: acceptance, awareness, and action. Those three things happen. When acceptance happens, I can have greater level of awareness. Whenever we are in denial or we pushing away from self-knowledge, we actually inhibit deeper awareness of ourselves. This kind of ties back to what I said a couple weeks ago, that there's no deep knowing of God without a deep knowing of self. So those need to be working in tandem. It was Augustine that said, "Lord, help me to know myself that I might know you." So as we gain self-knowledge, self-awareness is what I'm calling it, we have greater access to God's power. And when I am in denial, when I am shying away from deeper self-examination, it's often because I fear condemnation or I fear shame. And most of us have an aversion to both. We have an aversion to condemnation and to shame, and so we push away from self-knowledge. Because when we examine ourselves closely, it's inevitable we're going to find things we don't like. That's kind of Paul's whole deal in Romans 7. Why do I keep doing the things I don't want to do? And I want to do the right thing, but I do the wrong thing. His conundrum there is he's not sure what to do when he looks in and at this close examination. He ends by saying, "Thank God for Jesus, because he essentially meets me where I am and loves me to where Christ wants me to be." He's the one that can move me towards a standing, a space, a place, an environment of no condemnation, an environment of no shame. When I'm in that space, I can have greater levels of acceptance, which always accompany grace, greater levels of acceptance, which always accompany spiritual, healthy discipleship and community, which then can move me on to greater levels of discernment where I can act on truth and obedience. So those are the steps. We'll kind of dig into that this week. And then the stages that we'll look at are really just a lot like our physiological development, from spiritual birth and infancy to being children, childlikeness, to being spiritual adolescence, to becoming spiritually mature. So we're going to look at all of those things this week. So let me leave you with just a strong emphasis on acceptance. How does this fit into a holy God? Well, this holy God is not clueless to our condition, and he's not callous to our condition. He's not cavalier. He's compassionate. And this is not a New Testament revelation. This goes all the way back to the law, to the Pentateuch. The first real characteristic of God that Moses tells us about, the penman, the human instrument that documented the law, the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, Pentateuch, 5 books of the law, was compassion. Is it God's filled with compassion? Because of this rich compassion, He loves us in spite of our waywardness, our deceptive hearts, our rebellion. God still loves us. So here's a couple of verses that help us understand God's acceptance. Romans 15:7, in chapter 14 and 15, Paul's encouraging the believers in Rome, a pretty crazy space where there's lots of paganistic practices that are quite antithetical to a healthy community. Paul says, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you. So notice that. Accept one another horizontally, just as Christ, vertical God, accepted you. So the benchmark is Jesus. As Christ accepted us, accept one another. Not this kind of, conditional acceptance, not this, accept you here, but not here. This pervasive acceptance that Jesus gives us, that's how we're supposed to treat one another and ourselves. This is where we'll press in. So how did Jesus accept us? Well, let's go back in Romans a little bit to chapter 5, verse 6. You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous man, though for a good man, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates His own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. If He could love us at our worst, then we have to recognize He wants us to love ourselves at our worst. Not to tolerate emotional immaturity, not to stay where we are, but to accept the fact of where we are. It's the first place we've got to come to if we genuinely want to be transformed by God's acceptance and love. Love transforms. Not condemnation doesn't transform. Punishment doesn't transform. God's incredible acceptance and love, not to leave us where we are, but to meet us where we are, transforms us. So let Jesus, let God meet you where you are today and increase your level of acceptance. Jesus is the benchmark. Accept one another just as Christ accepted you. Lord, thank you for your extravagant grace, your mercy, your acceptance, your love. Lord, let us absorb more deeply these beautiful nuances of who you are. So, Lord, we can overflow both to ourselves and to others what you have freely given us. I'll see you tomorrow.